Good evening, students. Hope you're all doing well. We're going to talk about Chapter 5 tonight. And if I sound a bit funny, I, like everybody else, have had issues with the pollen that's in the air. So tonight we're going to talk about Chapter 5, Crisis and Risk Management. Crisis and Risk Communications. Those of you that had my classes in the past, I talk about probably one of the most important things that you'll ever learn is communication. We know in law enforcement, and we know through communication that 90% of the communication is nonverbal and only 10% of the communication is actually verbal. So the communications that we do have is very important. All of our issues I feel that we have in law enforcement today are due to communication issues. So we're going to talk about communication as it pertains to Homeland Security. So we're going to talk about crisis and risk communications. Some of our communications that we put out, obviously, is through social media. If you can imagine, some of you probably don't remember back in the days before email, before the internet. Some of you don't even know what that time frame was. When I came on the job 25 years ago, our communication was done picking up the phone and calling somebody. We didn't have text messages. We didn't have any social media. We were very limited in our communications. In fact, our best communications was our fax machine. We burned about a ream of paper a day. We didn't have email. We didn't have any of that. So it's all new in the last 25 years. And you can imagine in the last 5 years or 10 years, the rise of social media has had a very profound effect on everybody in every household in the world. Well, in this country, if not the world. We talk about, they put out on social media some of the preparedness toolkits. We put out social media blitzes when we're having floods, when we're having high waters, when we're having power outages. Law enforcement and the communications center put out social media blitzes, what to prepare for. If you remember, I don't remember what night it was, Tuesday or Wednesday night, don't quote me on it. This past week, we had 60-mile-per-hour winds. Very catastrophic. Two people in Dauphin County, I think, got hit pretty hard. There was 271,000 people without power in the mid-state region there. So you can imagine how do we get this information out. Thankfully that I did not see anybody had died or was injured, but it caused catastrophic property loss, trees into houses, on vehicles, in the roadway. I called into work. I was off, and they're like, we've been answering, down trees all day. So it was a small disaster that was locally generated in the fact that it happened everywhere between the northwestern Pennsylvania down to just below Lancaster County. But they're calling for some very significant winds, and it actually happened. I was actually concerned about trees at my place. How do we prepare for those risks, and how do we get that communication out? We knew ahead of time. If you watched the weather forecast, excuse me, if you watched the weather forecast, it was forecasting as a significant windstorm, and they put that information out both through social media, the news, that it was coming. We look at some of the missions of effective disaster communication strategy. We try to mitigate it, meaning to promote the implementation of strategies, technologies, and actions that will reduce the loss of lives and the damage to property in future disasters. They tell you this all the time, mitigation. I hear it every day, and well, not every day, all winter long when we have storms. If you don't need to go out, don't go out. If there's no need for you to go out, then just stay home. So the news tries to mitigate problems on the roadway to allow the road crews to get out and clear the roads. So the mitigation effort is, in fact, stay home. They do preparedness to communicate preparedness messages that educate and encourage the public to take action to prepare for future disasters. Cut down dead trees around your residence. If there's dead trees around telephone poles, call PP&L, let them know. And obviously the response is to provide the public notification, warning, evacuation, and situation reports on an ongoing disaster. And the recovery is obviously to provide individuals and communities affected by a disaster with information on how to register for and receive disaster relief. So when this windstorm went through, who do we call to handle if we have a tree that's blown down on our house? Who do we call? How do we get disaster relief? Do we call the Red Cross? Do we call our local 911 center to assist us in getting those things fixed around our residents? The biggest issue with communication, and it all comes down to leadership. When the communication is put out, is it precise? Is it early? It is important. I'm going to read this to you. It is important to be able to provide the public with timely messages that are accurate, precise, and authoritative so that when the public hears a warning, citizens know they can safely rely on the message and take the protective action required. We don't have Tom, Dick, and Harry getting on the news saying, that's an old saying for those of you that probably have never heard that. We don't have Tom, Dick, and Harry, meaning a normal person. Getting on TV, we have the president, the vice president, who's telling you, get out of those areas. You're going to be affected by this natural disaster. Please take shelter and things like that. And it's very important for our leadership to come out and make those tough decisions. If you remember back when the COVID-19 pandemic came out, President Trump quickly closed travel to China. And of course, the media read it as xenophobia. But in fact, it was an excellent communication that our leader came out and said, we're going to stop travel to China, which is a source country for COVID-19. And we're not going to allow travel to and from China. Has nothing to do with Chinese people, had nothing to do. This was where the source of COVID-19 was. And if you just recall, starting Tuesday, India has seen a spike in the COVID-19 again, but some of the offshoots of COVID-19, the more aggressive strain. So what did President Biden do? What he should do. As of Tuesday, no travel in and out of India. It's not because Biden is against people of Indian descent. It's because our leader came out, saw that it was a pandemic and an issue, and he stopped people from coming to and from India to get that variant COVID-19 stopped and not brought into this country. So when we talk about situational awareness, we need to be aware of those informations, and it's the Department of Homeland Security to release some of that information. They have an operations center to release what information is accurate and relevant to the American people. You look on page 184. This is something that we talk about quite frequently in law enforcement, as well as, I shouldn't say law enforcement, as a first responder. I just see myself as law enforcement, but in fact, we have firefighters, EMS, we have all those first responders, and we have what's called an incident command. Now, an incident command post is usually set up away from the area. It's not set up near the incident. An incident command post can be 2 miles away. It can be 20 miles away. It can be 100 miles away. Okay, and inside that incident command staff, the public information officer, the safety officer, and the liaison officer. And the liaison officer coordinates all the different police, fire, EMS, rescue teams, PP&L responders. I mean, all of the people involved is the liaison officer. The public information officer is a person who's well versed in giving accurate information to the public when it's needed. When we have major incidents, we call on our public information officer, who gives information that the public needs. Okay, if you look in some of the scenes where there's shootings or there's a homicide, the public information officer will come out and say, there's no harm to the public. You shouldn't be alarmed. There's not an armed man out there right now. That leads me to believe that somebody's in custody or the perpetrator actually died. But he doesn't give details, just information that the public needs relevant, needs to have in those neighborhoods. And underneath that, you have the operations section chief, the planning section chief, the logistics, and the finance. Who's paying for this? You know, where does that money come from? Does it all come from FEMA, or is it money that we need to find to handle this situation? So we try to build what's called a media partnership. And in that partnership, when I say media, we're talking about all types of media, all types of social media. The news that you see on TV, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. I mean, they're popping up. I was reading in the book, and some of these I had not even heard of. But I have some interesting statistics that I read that just boggled my mind. Every 60 seconds on Facebook, 510,000 comments are posted. 293,000 statuses are updated. And 136,000 photos are uploaded to Facebook every 60 seconds. Okay? Worldwide, there is 2.4 billion Facebook users. Billion with a B. If we want to get information out quickly, and we want to get information out such as the COVID-19 pandemic, we are going to use those social media outlets to disseminate that information. I know there's been a lot of talk over the previous 4 years over the information that's being put out. And depending on who's putting it out, is it in fact accurate information? Or is it skewed one way or the other, whatever political party you are? And that's where I think we're getting caught up. I think we're looking at politically dealing with COVID-19 instead of actually dealing with it as a disaster plan. So every time that we have a disaster, we need to have a communication plan in effect, ready to analyze and identify sources of information, and how do we get that relevant information out. If you think about Twitter and Facebook and Instagram, if we put out information to government, it gets where it needs to get rather quickly. You know, you look on social media and you'll see it's crazy. Live live scenes from a police involved incident from clean across the country. And it's amazing how fast that stuff goes on the social media. And we can actually see that information live. Not only do we provide information to those users, can't we also monitor those Facebook posts to gather information? Think about, we talk about natural disasters and we talked a bunch about that, but think about terrorism. Are you telling me that the NSA, the CIA, or the FBI is not monitoring Facebook posts? Think about that. Grant you, they don't care about my daughter's birthday that I posted on Facebook, blah, blah, blah. But they have algorithms that they use in their computers when you use certain phrases, certain words that could be violent, sensitive areas. You start talking about the algorithm, such as a bomb at the White House. That is probably going to draw some attention to your Facebook page, to where someone might be analyzing whether it's a valid threat or just someone spouting off. Because we do have First Amendment rights. I get that. But if we look at terrorism and the use of social media, we are definitely, we meaning the government, are monitoring social media activity. There's no question. So cell phone communication. So we take that information and we can use some of that information as we're assessing what information we need to put back out. So we're pulling all this information in, okay? We're sifting through it, we're analyzing it, and then we decide what information we're going to put back out to the public. I never, I guess, sat down and thought about social media as a outlet, but in fact, as I read through the book and I think about my lectures and I deal with some of that, I sit down and I think about, wow, I guess I never thought of that, the use of social media. Last week we had a fatal collision where we needed to identify a woman. If you saw it on Penn Live, literally, I put the information out on our social media page, and I noticed it had 275 shares in less than 2 hours. And the woman who was in the picture called me. So within 2 hours, I couldn't figure out who this woman was, who was not a suspect, a Good Samaritan. And and I read the book and I think about how it pertains to my work, and it worked very well. I needed information. She had information that I needed from her. I put it out and it just went crazy. Let's find this woman. Let's find this woman. I was getting phone calls from news outlets. Can you elaborate? 2 hours. I was talking to her on the phone, and what a great source of information. But again, that source of information has to be correct. We have a joke I don't know if it's in law enforcement or other people. Well, I read it on the internet. It has to be true. Who puts that source of information out? Where does that information come from? So that's kind of crisis and risk communications. I breezed through it a little bit, but I can't tell you the importance of communication. I think it's probably the most important aspect you will ever learn in Homeland Security Management and being an investigator, either Homeland Security investigator or probation or a wife or a girlfriend. Communication is probably the most important thing there is. And people who are leaders, I mean, you look at the people who lead this country are excellent communicators. Okay. You know, President Clinton, um, President Obama, very articulate speakers. So when they came out and they talked, people listened. And that's really what our pastors do in church. Excellent communicators. They take information from us and then they put out a sermon, and we listen to them as they are great communicators. So I think about that as you sit down, and how does this pertain to what I'm doing? And it's actually very important. I can't stress enough the importance of communication. That's chapter 5 in a nutshell. I'm going to put another quick video out here shortly on your research project and some upcoming. So this is week 5. Next week is week 6. You do not get a break. Week 6, you will have your midterm examination. It will be an online examination. It will be true, false, multiple choice. I don't know how many questions. I can't remember off the top of my head. You have plenty of time to take it. My tests aren't here to fail you. My tests are here to cover the important parts of the book that you can remember and take some information with you. I'm not going to ask you that 293,000 people will upload. That's not important to me. Those are facts that you can look up on your phone in 3 seconds. I'm looking to give you information that you will take with you. That you'll have all week to take that examination. On top of your examination, you will have coursework as well that you'll have to be completed. So it's going to be a busy week, week 6. You'll have all week to take your examination. You'll have a week to take the examination. I know some people work during the day and can't do it until their schoolwork till weekends. That's fine. I'm giving you 7 days to complete your midterm examination. It'll be open next Sunday to the following Sunday, so you have 7 days. Guys, have a great week, and we'll see you at midterm.